Yeah, we're live.
Okay, welcome everyone to today's webinar on digital success strategies for skating. My name is Beth Crane and I am your host today.
Today's webinar on digital success strategies for skating.
I
am your host today.
This is the second webinar in our 6-part series. The webinars are intended as an overview for the virtual events toolkit. If you want to have really good details about the toolkit, then you can check on the ISU website. I'd like to introduce a few people who are behind the scenes today. Today we have Elizabeth Donnelly joining us, and she is the e-learning coordinator, and she is working behind the scenes. We also have Sally Rahoric, who is joining us here. She's on the e-learning project team, and she will be monitoring questions on the e-learning on the YouTube channel. So we'll see her there, bringing in some of your questions. Normally we have our presenter from today. She is normally in the background, but today our presenter is Elena Iniguez de Heredia, and she is our Toolkit webinar project assistant. Elena was also working on the toolkit with us, and she was preparing a lot of the documents and the video instructional guides on how to host a live event, which you can find in the toolkit as well. Elena is from Argentina, and she is currently living in a small beach town in Peru. And she is really experienced in a lot of the challenges that we've all faced during the last year when we've been trying to get up to speed for running virtual events. So I asked Elena some of the challenging events that she's worked on over the last year. And one of them, she said, was she ran a webinar from a jungle in Mexico. Another event that she did that was also a bit of a challenge, I'm sure, and I was officiating that event. And that event was a virtual off-ice event with 250 athletes. And so that, of course, means 250 cameras and 250 locations. And not everyone was that experienced in virtual events or using their camera, etc. So I'm sure based on all these events from the past year, Elena's got a lot of tips for us and strategies on virtual events. So Elena, over to you.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you for everyone for being here on webinar 2 for our virtual events toolkit webinar series. So today's topic is the digital success strategies based on, like Beth said, all the experience that we learned over the past year hosting and participating in different virtual events. There are some common challenges and issues that we found that were repeating a lot during these experiences. So we found it was good to put them all together and share some practical solutions that we found to solve them and to make the most of a virtual event experience. So a brief overview of the session. We're going to start by seeing what to expect when participating in a virtual event so that you know what you have to prepare before coming to the event and everything that goes behind the scenes, let's say. We're going to talk also about the technical requirements that you will need to either host or participate in virtual events. And since the platform that we use in the toolkit is Zoom, we're going to talk a little bit about joining a Zoom meeting and all the Zoom basics that we're going to use during these virtual events. We're also going to cover the perfect setup, and I'm going to give you different options depending on what you have at your home and the tasks that you're going to perform in the events. And we're gonna also talk about disconnection protocols. You know that everyone is its biggest fear. What happens if I get disconnected? Yeah, that can happen to anyone at any time. So we're gonna cover that as well. And we're gonna finish our webinar with a little interactive activity. So be prepared to share your experiences with your colleagues. And of course, the questions at the end of the webinar. And I remind you, if you have any questions during the presentation, just feel free to type them on the chat and our host will monitor them to ask them in the end. So let's start with what to expect. So I cannot emphasize this enough, but preparation is key. And I'm going to repeat this a lot during this webinar because just like any event, you need to prepare yourself. It's not that you get the time and the Zoom link and you just join the meeting without checking anything first. So there is a whole bunch of things that you will need to prepare. Like, for example, when you go to officiate in an event, there are lots of things that were prepared for you at the rink. You know, you had volunteers printing the copies, setting up the system, making you coffee, but now you are alone on your home. So you will have to take care of all these things before actually starting the event. So preparation is key. Save enough time for preparation. And if you want to go to the toolkit, there are some useful checklists there that can help you prepare and make sure you have everything you need for that. Another topic is every event is different. And what I mentioned, I wanted to mention this because sometimes we are part of one event and then we tend to think that, oh, I got this. So next time it's going to be the same. And that is not always the case. Sometimes procedures and protocols change a little bit. For example, let's say that you have officiated in an event with videos and the streaming site that was used was Dropbox. So you learned how to judge videos on Dropbox. But what if the next time, instead of Dropbox, you use Vimeo, or YouTube or any other thing? So things change a little bit, details change a little bit, and sometimes even procedures and protocols change a little bit, depending on who's hosting and who's organizing the event. So my advice here would be always check the procedures and check the protocols, and do not think that the event, the new event you're going to is going to be the same as last time. Another important advice here was try to migrate your skills to the virtual format. I know that lots of things are different and that sometimes might be a challenge and a little bit scary, why not? But try to focus on the common points. You know, like, for example, for me, the first time I hosted a virtual event, I didn't know what to expect and what I was going to do, but then I found out that I was in charge of having the skaters ready to perform. And that's usually what I do on normal events. And what I do on normal events is I keep running around the venue at the ring, trying to find everyone and gather the groups and make sure they're ready. And here I was just sitting in front of my computer on my phone, just texting parents and making sure skaters were ready, just the same as I would be doing at the ring, but just a little bit different because it was with a virtual communication instead of being actually there with them. So try to find that common spot and just focus on performing your tasks just slightly differently. And the last thing I wanted to mention here, and it's also very important, is that this is a continuing learning process. I want to say that it's actually a never-ending learning process. Even for us, we've been hosting and participating in virtual events for almost a year now, and we always learn new things. Even with this webinar series, we keep learning new things, and sometimes even the tools we use get updates and change a little bit. So it's a never-ending learning process that I would recommend that you embrace the learning, get off your comfort zone, and be ready and open to learn new things every time you go to an online activity. And something to mention here is also it's recommended that you start simple. If you want to host an event, try to start with maybe a discussion meeting or a simple webinar instead of going straight to hosting a competition with 250 different cameras for an off-ice event. So talking about technical requirements, the first thing you will need to check is that you have a reliable internet connection. And for that, I'm gonna ask Elizabeth to please share on the chat the speed test link. That is a very useful website that you can use to check if your internet connection is reliable and if you have the minimum speed needed to perform your tasks on an event. And also it's recommended that if possible, you can connect to the internet using a cable connection instead of Wi-Fi. And I'm gonna ask Beth to share a little example here so that you can relate to this.
Sorry, it was right near the very beginning when we were doing an event, and I usually have very reliable internet and good speed, and so I have a cable and I also have Wi-Fi, but I didn't realize during the event somehow the cable connection got loose, and all of a sudden I was on Wi-Fi. And I was like 15 to 20 seconds behind everyone else. So in one occasion, I heard someone calling an element, but I was still on the element that hadn't even finished. And so I was very confused about, what was going on. So I could definitely tell Wi-Fi connection is not as good as a cable. So I definitely check my cable connections now before I start the event. So thanks.
Thank you, Beth. Like I said, it has happened. Everything that we're talking about here has happened to us. So we will try to share our examples and share our learnings so that you can relate to those. Another good advice is check that your batteries are charged on your devices. It has happened to me more than once that suddenly I run out of battery on my phone or my computer, and then you go look for the charger, and that's something that you can avoid by preparing it in advance. The same goes to use the most updated version of software. You have seen that for this webinar, we have included a link in the registration email for you to download the most updated version of Zoom, because last week we have realized that not everyone was using the latest version. So when we asked them to use the raise hand reaction, some people were confused about the guidelines because it was on different parts of their screen. So that's another learning spot for us, help people prepare and use the most updated software. And the final advice here is try to find cooperation with your family or the people you live with. And this means that if it's possible, ask them not to use internet connection during your event, because that will guarantee that you are using the most bandwidth possible. And if someone else is using it at the same time, your connection lowers a little bit. And the same goes with your computer. Try to not have, for example, your email running in the background. Try to close everything you have on your computer and only have the apps or the programs that you're going to use open on your computer for that. And that will give you a better use. And here, as I said before, preparation is key, but as a host or as the organizer, you will need to help participants get ready and prepare. So if you're organizing or if you're hosting an event, make sure you send them all the information early in advance and with all the guidelines and checklists that they will need. So if you want to check them on the toolkit, there are lots of different examples there to use. So joining a Zoom meeting. The first thing here, I know that everyone will relate, is check your time zones, because nowadays we're used to, if we're going to an international event, we just travel and we have jet lag, but now we don't travel anymore. We just connect from our homes. So we have Zoom lag, and that is getting confused and messed up with time zones. And let me say that it even happens to Siri and Alexa. No matter how smart those ladies are, sometimes I have had to modify my calendar because they have understood that an event was in my time zone when it was on European Central Time or whatever. So check time zones. And for that, Elizabeth is going to share in the chat a useful tool that we use. It's called World Time Buddy. And we encourage you that you use it every single time, because something tricky here is that sometimes countries even change their time zones. So let's change time to save daylight. And then you had memorized that there was 3 hours difference between your country and another one, and all of a sudden there are only 2. So check it every single time and do not rely on these smart things that sometimes are not that smart. And I know that Beth has a very good example to relate to this.
Yes, actually, I've got 2, and the first one relates to the calendar issue, where I was just sitting there. I'd been up for 3 hours. I was having my coffee, ready for the event in 3 hours, and all of a sudden I got a text. Well, are you coming or not? And I was like, what? No, it's not for 3 hours. And they're like, no, you are on the wrong time zone. And sure enough, in my calendar, I was perfectly on time, but calendar had specified the wrong time zone, and I hadn't checked on it and changed it. So that was number 1. The second time was also near the beginning, and I had asked an official if they could come to the event, and they said sure, and I told them the time, and I assumed I knew where they were. But unbeknownst to me, it was during the pandemic, and they had moved 4 time zones away. So I learned my lesson, because then I'm like, well, are you coming or not? I sent them the message, and they quickly got ready and came on the event. But I can imagine as we move forward, and everyone is not at their house and traveling and going here and there, we will not know what time zone everyone is in. So it's really up to us to use something like World Time Buddy to be responsible for ourselves for what time is the event, and I need to set my phone so I'm actually there when I should be. Thanks.
Thank you, Beth. I know that some people missed last week webinars because of this, so we have all been there, and I'm sure many of us can relate to this. Another thing that we need to consider when we join a Zoom meeting is our backgrounds. So choose a nice background, and this means it doesn't have to be anything fancy or professional. Just make sure your bathroom door is not behind you or things like that. Virtual backgrounds are also a good option. I know that some computers may not have the option to use them, but some people have been using them and they work really well. And that is something that you should consider when joining a meeting. The following advice is have the Zoom link accessible. And this goes both ways. If you're hosting an event, you will tend to send everything ahead of time, let's say a couple of days before the day of the event, and that includes the Zoom invitation. People tend to receive lots of emails every single day, so it is a good practice to resend that Zoom link the day of the event. You have received today's webinar Zoom link this morning, because it's normal that people that email that we sent a few days ago got lost in your inbox, and then at the start time of the event, the host starts getting all sorts of messages. I cannot find a link. Where is the Zoom information? So the good advice here is just resend it. Let's say 1 hour before the start time of the event. It's good for them to be prepared. Another thing that you will have to consider when you are joining a Zoom event is choose the right device for whatever task are you going to perform. And for example, here today, for you to join our webinar, it's okay if you do it from your phones or your tablets. But let's say you're invited to judge a virtual event, then you will not be able to do it from your phone. So you may want to consider using a computer or something like that. So again, preparation is key. Check the protocols, check the procedure, and choose the device according to those. And to talk about a little bit netiquette and the view layout options, I'm going to ask Beth to show us an example of that she has suffered herself during an event.
Yes. So this happened to me when I was taking a class. There was only 4 of us in the class, but there was one person who was, the word annoying might be a good word. She was doing a lot of this kind of thing. And so I was trying not to look at her Zoom little box because she was moving all over like this. And at that point, I didn't know that that I could use my settings and not have to look at that lady. So that was one of my examples that the view options I didn't know about yet. And I pretty soon found out how to use view options when I was taking that class, because that lady did not change her behavior throughout the 4-part series. So
yeah, so if you go to the toolkit, there are lots of links that will guide you to the Zoom support website where you will be able to check the different layout options for you when you are participating in a Zoom event. Basically, there are 2 main options. One is the gallery view, where you are able to see every single participant's cameras, or you can choose the speaker's view that that allows you to see the speaker in a bigger camera and the participants in smaller ones. You also would like to check the thumbnails when someone is sharing their screen. For example, those of you in Zoom here are watching my presentation. I'm sharing my screen, so you will have the thumbnails at some part of your screen. You can move them if it's bothering you there. You can minimize them. So there are lots of options. And I encourage you to go to the toolkit and check those links that are very useful and will help you have a better experience in Zoom events. Another thing that it's really important, and not everyone is aware that this happens, is log in your account using your real name, and if possible, in English or in the language of the organizers. And this is just for security reasons. You know that when you join a meeting, first you go to a waiting room. The host receives a message that someone is in the waiting room. And if that someone doesn't have a recognized name, for security reasons, we won't allow them to join because simply we don't know who they are. And there have been some cases of hackers joining Zoom meetings, and we don't want that to happen during an event. So it's important that you check that you're logging in your account using your real name. For example, during a very important event, I had someone joining in with a bunch of numbers. So I didn't allow them. And suddenly I got a phone call saying, hey, it's me. I'm trying to join, but no one is letting me in. So that happens if you don't check, or if you don't change your name on the Zoom account before joining the meeting, it's possible that you won't be allowed. And sometimes when you join from your tablet or from your phone, the default option from Zoom is to name you like Susie's iPhone or something like that. Try to rename yourself before joining, and you will have a better experience for sure. So the following advice on the list Oh, I'm sorry, I was muted, right? I am sure this has happened to all of us, and I'm pretty sure it will continue happening a little bit more because we all try to mute and unmute ourselves during the events and the presentations, and because we don't want any dogs barking in the background or noises interrupting us. So check if you're muted before you start speaking. That's my best advice for the day. And the last item on our list is, if possible, try to work on your own office. Try to ask your spouses or roommates or family members to stay in another room so that you won't get interrupted during your presentation, or if you're judging, you don't want to miss a specific part of that. Oh, okay. Oh, hi. So yeah, okay. Try not to have that happen during your event. That can happen to all of us. We have had some cats calling in technical panels, dogs joining webinars, and it is possible to avoid it by just being in another room. So setup options. How to get the perfect setup. I'm going to start by saying that the perfect setup, it's what works for you, and what works for you might not work for someone else. So I will give you some different options, and you will have to see what you have available and what works for you during the event. And again, depending on what are you doing during that event. So the first option here is only using one computer. It is what I am doing right now. So sometimes if you need to use different programs at the same time in your computer, we recommend that you use a split screen. I have found that not everyone knows how to do that. So I want to show you how to use a split screen in your computer. So I'm going to start sharing my desktop so that you can see how it works. Okay, so for example, I have my PowerPoint open here, and I also have a Chrome window open at the other side. So I'm going to move this to cover half of the screen, and I'm going to move the PowerPoint a little bit so that I can see both at the same time. So now I'm using a Chrome window here on one side of my screen, and my PowerPoint presentation or a video or whatever you're using for the event on the other half. So you just go to the side of the window, and when the cursor changed into an arrow, you just click and move, and you will find it easier to move it, make it larger or smaller, depending on your screen. So that's how it works. So let me go back to my presentation. And remember that if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, and we're going to cover those at the Q&A session in the end. Okay, good. You're back at seeing my presentation, right? Good. So second option, and it's something that most officials are choosing, is using your computer connected to an extended screen. So I'm going to ask Beth to show us how her setup works like this.
Okay. So I end up using my computer as my scoring system. And then I use my external monitor as my skating rink. Originally, I started off just using my computer. So I had on my scoring system, the video, the Zoom meeting, and I also had on WhatsApp. And I found that a little difficult. So originally I just found an old monitor at our house. And then I decided myself, just because I did this quite a bit, that I would go to my external monitor. So this is my setup right now. As you can see, the screen is quite big, so I can get to see the skating quite clearly. I know everyone can't do that, but maybe there is a external monitor somewhere a friend has or around your house that you might be able to use. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Beth. That is very useful, especially when you're using different apps and you need, like larger screens or how to organize things better for you to check them at the same time. So the third option that we want to share with you is actually using two different devices. In the picture, you can see two different computers, or you can also use a computer and a tablet, or in some cases, again, depending on depending on your task, and if you can perform your job using a smartphone, you can also consider that. Here, I would like to say that check the procedure very in detail, because if you're using two different devices, connection between them is not always easy. So let's say that you are connected to a Zoom meeting using one device, and the organizers are sharing video links through the Zoom chat, but you were planning to watch the videos in a separate computer on a different one. You won't be able to open the videos on your second computer if your Zoom is only connected on your first one. So that connection needs to be planned and prepared depending on how the procedure will go. And that's why it's so important that first, the organizers share that procedure in detail with all participants and maybe even have a rehearsal. It's a very good practice so that everyone can understand how it works. And second, participants checking that procedure and reading the documents before joining the event so that you can prepare your setup depending on the needs that you have during the event. Some final advices about the perfect setup is we found that sometimes it's useful to know the difference between a new tab and a new window, especially when you're judging events that use videos. So I'm going to show you an example for that. I'm going to start sharing my Chrome window now so you can see it. Okay, it's here. So for example, here I have a worksheet. I was supposed to call the elements. I'm part of the technical panel and I'm supposed to use this worksheet to call the elements. So here I have a link to a video. So if I just click on it, the video will open on a new tab. And that means that I cannot see my worksheet anymore. So where did my worksheet go? It just stayed on a different tab. So if I go back to that tab, now I can work, but now I cannot see the video. So what I recommend here is that you just use the right click and open the video in a new window. That way, you will be able to use the split screen and you will have the video on one side of the screen and the worksheet on the other side. So let me go back to my presentation. I think that Beth has an example here to share about that. Beth?
Yes, I didn't realize that was going to be a problem. So I was judging an event and I thought I had done all my preparation and I was all set up. And so I had my judging screen open and then they started and I clicked on the video to start and the video flew from my monitor that you saw over to my computer and covered up my scoring. So I was thinking, well, I can't enter any of my scores right now. So I had to do what I don't normally do. And that is just keep watching the skater and entering my marks on the sheet of paper. And then when it was all done, that skater, I moved her off my scoring system and started entering my marks. But yeah, I've learned a lot this year. And that was one of the things, just one of the things that I've learned this year from making all sorts of unexpected errors.
And we will keep learning for sure. So good, thank you. Another thing that sometimes it's a big challenge when we wanted to prepare the perfect setup is the full screen mode. And something that Zoom does is that by default, when someone starts sharing their screen, it just goes full screen mode. And that sometimes it's a problem because if you are not aware of that, you think that you have lost all your things. So I recommend that you take the time to play around those things. Make sure you understand how the full screen mode works so that you can unselect it and organize things and apps on your screen the way that works for you. And again, if you go to the toolkit, there are lots of examples on how to do this with step-by-step instructions for you. So talking about sharing your screen, that's something tricky as well, especially if you're sharing videos. But let's start with files. I'm going to show you how the share screen Zoom options work. I'm going to show you a screenshot that I took this morning. So when you select the screen sharing options on Zoom, this is what you will see first. This window identifies all the files and programs that you have open in your computer at this exact moment. So that means that, for example, if I want to share a picture and I go directly to share my screen, but I haven't opened the picture previously, that picture won't show here. So all of a sudden I will be like, oh, how can I do this? Because I cannot find my picture here. So my advice is, before you start the event, make sure you have all the files that you want to share open and ready to go on your computer, so that by the time comes when you want to share them, they show up here and you can select them and start sharing them. And something to have in mind when you want to share a video is that if you don't click here, this little checkbox hidden at the bottom of the screen, people won't be able to listen to the music. And the tricky part is that since you're playing the video on your device, you will hear the music, but you won't know that you're the only one hearing the music. And unless some people tell you, hey, you're not sharing the music, you won't realize that this is happening. So my advice here is going to be, always check these little boxes here at the bottom before clicking the blue button that actually starts sharing your screen. So back to the PowerPoint. The final message here is that working with multiple apps or programs at the same time can be challenging. And even after you have more experience, like we said, it's a process and it's a continuing learning experience. So I would recommend that you take the time to practice, open everything you would need and start playing around by yourself. Ask another friends or colleagues if they want to join our meeting and practice together, so that you are better prepared for the day of the event and you're ready to perform your tasks the best way possible. So to end with this presentation, we want to talk a little about disconnection. It can happen at any time and it can happen to anyone. I have been in events where people were like, oh, no worry, I have a 200 megabytes internet cable fiber optic connection that will never fail until it fails. And sometimes we are not even aware how much we rely on electricity. What happens if suddenly the power goes off? You will get disconnected no matter how good your Wi-Fi is. So there is nothing we can do to 100% avoid it, but we can prepare and be ready to act if it happens. So that would be, always have a backup plan and try to involve backup people. For example, our backup plan for this webinar, in case I got disconnected, I have sent my PowerPoint presentation to Beth so that if all of a sudden I am gone, Beth has everything to continue with the webinar without me there. And if you check the toolkit, there is a participant handbook template that you can use that includes all different kinds of disconnection protocols. What happens is that if a judge disconnected in the middle of an event. And something important to have in mind here is you will need to have a communication protocol. For example, I was coordinating an event where all of a sudden a judge got disconnected. So we needed to know and to decide, the referee needed to make a decision whether to wait for them to come back or to continue without them. So to make that decision, we needed to know what happened. And since we have a disconnection protocol, this judge had my contact number on their phones. So she was able to call me and tell me that she was using her work computer. And since this was a Sunday, her company decided to run updates on all the work computers. So we just needed to wait until the updates were ready. And that was only 5 minutes. So we just could make the decision of waiting for him to come back when the updates were finished. But if you don't have a communication protocol, or if you do not give participants your contact number ahead of time, then this gets a little bit tricky, and it gets a lot of stress also. So there are also some alternative options that I wanted to mention here, and is you can use your smartphones as hotspot. That is something that I always do. I always have my smartphone beside me and ready to change the internet connection if I see it's failing. So I have my data on my phone available to share it with my screen, with my computer, sorry. And that is my plan B for disconnections. And I know that there are also some mobile modems options that you can use. And again, if you go to the toolkit, you will find this in much more detail. So now it's your time to share your experiences and your challenges and your learnings by participating in virtual events. So what we're going to do is we will send you to breakout rooms for the people here in Zoom. We will send you to breakout rooms so that you can discuss in smaller groups with your colleagues. What are your challenging experiences? What are your examples? Or what did you learn new here today, so that you can discuss a little bit. You will be there for 5 minutes, and then you will come back to the main room. But while you are there, Beth, Sally, and I will stay here in the main room to do the exact same activity for our viewers on YouTube to hear us during the interactive activity. So if you come back from your breakout rooms and you hear us talking, that is what's happening. We are discussing our experiences ourselves, so that people watching the streaming on YouTube can also participate in this activity. So you will get a notification now from Elizabeth asking you to join the breakout rooms. And we expect you to be back in 5 minutes. Good. So Beth and Sally, if you want to do this activity with me. You're here? Yes, you're here. Good. So I can start by sharing my experience, as I said before, is that for me, this is a never-ending process, a never-ending learning process. Every single time when I participate or host a new virtual event, I end up learning something new, a new feature that I didn't know existed, or something that participants asked that I didn't realize was going to be a challenge for them, or a question I could get. So I find that so challenging, and you know that after 1 year of hosting events, you might think that, oh, I know everything, I can do this with my eyes closed, and that's not the case. One good example that I have is that the first virtual event that I hosted on Zoom was the Spinners event. So we had almost around 70 skaters joining from their homes and performing spins off ice. But I didn't know that I could spotlight their cameras on Zoom. I had no idea that that was a feature that I could use. So I asked officials to pin their cameras, and every time a skater was about to perform, I had to ask the host, make sure everyone is watching the right skater. And we did it that way. I mean, now that I think about it, it was so dumb because of course the host can control the cameras, but that's something that I didn't know back then. So that was one of my first learning spots, and I am so grateful that I did, because now it's so much easier to run those kinds of events. I don't know, what are your experiences?
I think
Ali,
Sally, you had one, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, everything that you said, Elena, I think I've experienced. And I think my heart doesn't race as much anymore when I hear these, because I do have some strategies. However, one that didn't come up earlier was I was judging a competition, and I somehow opened the screen where the skaters were skating twice. But one of them, I thought I had closed, but I hadn't. It was in the background. Anyway, so first skater comes out, and I'm hearing an echo of the music. Couldn't figure it out. I thought, that's terrible music. Who's the coach here? Second skater, same thing. Third skater, same thing. So at the break, at the next warm up, I said, is anybody hearing an echo? No, it was because I had the two screens open. I just didn't see the second one, and I was hearing two. And I finally figured that one out. So, but I've had all the other things that you mentioned, for sure.
Well, I think I might have learned one today. So, and maybe Elena or Sally has some advice for me, because when I started off the introduction today, I think I should have closed the my computer sound, because in the background I heard YouTube. I heard myself on YouTube like 10 seconds behind, and then I didn't know whether I'm on or I'm off, or was it my computer or somebody else's computer. But I think for that portion, I needed to just turn off my sound. So Elena, is that what I should have done? Is that what I've learned today?
Possibly, yeah. It could have been you, or it could have been someone else with their microphones open and with the YouTube in their speakers. And that is something that is so difficult to identify. You know, like Sally said, where is that echo coming from? Because it's difficult to identify where is the sound coming and what is actually going on. So for that one, I would say that my recommendation would be, for hosts, always have a person in the production team, like Elizabeth is doing today for us. Their main task is to control microphones in Zoom. As a host or a co-host, you have the ability to mute everyone if you see that something like that is happening. And from the participants' side, I will always recommend try to use headsets. That minimizes the risk of having echo or, you know, feedback like that a lot. Yeah, but it can happen.
Yeah, it did happen today.
Actually, I had that happen at the first webinar, because I'm monitoring, of course, the YouTube channel. Hello, everybody on YouTube. Glad you're here. But the exact same thing. And this morning it happened again because I forgot. So it's, you know, there's something about, you know, if you don't do things very often, it's easy to forget something that you thought you learned last week, but you didn't. Maybe it's only my problem, but I figured it out very fast this morning compared to the first time I did it.
Mm-hmm.
No, it has happened to all of us. I think that one of the takeaways that we can give people from this webinar is that we're all at the same learning process, and we have all been there. We have all faced these challenges, and if we are today able to give this webinar to people, is because we have been there. It has happened to us, and it keeps happening to us, and probably it will keep happening.
It will keep happening to me.
Less often, and we will be able to solve it quicker and quickly. So that's the whole point of this webinar series, to share our experiences with all of you, so that you can learn from our mistakes and then do them again on your own, but knowing how to solve them. So yeah.
Sorry, I have a couple of comments that are on the YouTube. Frédéric Delage is with us again this week. He says, having key people, numbers, and emergency protocols in place is so important. I come from the broadcast digital industry. This is an absolute key process. So glad to hear the recommendation today about that communication protocol. And Monica Wagner-Kutinova, great explanations, thanks. I have no experience with virtual competitions, but I can imagine all scenarios. It's a challenge.
Good. Thank you, Sally. That's so good that we have people joining us on YouTube. So thank you for being there. I see that our participants are back in the main room. Welcome back, everyone. So Beth, do you want to ask someone to share their experiences?
Yes, we looked at the participant list and went like this and said, okay, well, we need two people to be sharing their some of their experiences. And so we have two people now. The first one is Tari Ristinen, and she has been on numerous meetings, as we probably all have been, and webinars, and she's been to participated in one virtual competition. So Daria, can you share with us some of your experiences that you've had this year?
Yes, thank you, Beth, and hi to everyone. Our federation organized 2 months ago a virtual competition for a selected number of skaters who sent their videos in. And the technical panel was working after, not online, like a live event, but the technical panel worked. And then us, the judges panel, we were informed that after this time on a certain day, you can do the short program, and then the following day, the free skating. So we worked from home at our own time, but on a certain day. And I would like to share two experiences, maybe three. I was happy that I could succeed technically to see the video on one screen, and then I operated for the Google Docs to feed in my marks on my laptop. And when I started to do that, at first I thought, oh no, this is nothing like, this is so different from a real life competition at an ice rink with the what you see and what you hear and how you see the movement. And then suddenly I realized, well, this is different, and but we can still do it, and we can help the skaters, and we can keep ourselves going. It's just a matter of changing attitude, that of course it's not the same, but it's really interesting, and it can be done just in a slightly different way. And then the second thing I'd like to share with you was that in addition to this working at home, we operated on Teams. So we had an initial judges meeting with our referee and then the person from our federation to make sure that we had understood how it technically works, and then something about the judging itself, like in a normal initial judges meeting. And then after we'd done our work and the results were published, then a couple of days later we had a roundtable, which was run by our referee, and we could share our experiences. We actually talked more about how we felt about judging online, than the actual performances. But it was still very, very good, and I felt I was part of a judging panel.
Great, thanks very much, Tarja. I appreciate your insights and you sharing with us today. We also have Jeroen Prince, and Jeroen has done lots of virtual events this season, and he is also, I know, very experienced in different kinds of technology and media. So I thought it would be interesting to hear from Jeroen as well. Even though he's experienced, he's learned some things through the year. So Jeroen, please.
Yeah, thank you, Beth. Hello, everyone. Just sharing on my experiences from this season. I've done, I think, 3 events, virtual events. One online monitoring session with skaters who sent in their programs ahead of the session, and then they were skating on the ice and I gave feedback to them. And I did a whole technical panel seminar, and that was last summer. And especially that one brought a lot of technical challenges. People in August went in from their holiday address on vacation Wi-Fi. So that obviously did not work so well. Sharing my screen as a moderator was a big problem. Not only technically, because yeah, sharing your screen and then doing slow motions, it just doesn't work for everyone. For me, it worked. For several others, it worked. But if your connection is not strong, it won't work. Then you cannot see any slow motion. I also encountered the problem that sharing my screen and playing videos, suddenly my virus scanner protested and didn't let me play videos. So my advice is check your settings on your virus app or virus program before you start sharing, and especially with videos. It could be a security issue on your computer. And then, well, there were so many challenges, but you learn on the spot, even if I'm a bit experienced and also in technique, but I was not so experienced with Zoom or MS Teams, which we use a lot in Holland too. So you learn every time and you adapt all the time. And the main takeaway here is don't panic, don't freak out, stay calm. There should be a backup plan that really helps a lot. The contact details, the emergency plan, that helps a lot. And yeah, just be prepared to adapt on the spot. When we did the seminar, all of a sudden everything froze. We all disconnected, reconnected. We tried sharing from another screen. We did so many different things. So yeah, at some point you become very ingenious on trying out alternatives. So that's my takeaway. Don't panic and be flexible, and something will work.
Great. Thanks very much, Jeroen. I hadn't even thought of that virus scanner issue until you mentioned it today. So one more thing for us to check on. So Elena, do you have anything else you would like to add before we close up for today?
No, I think that those were great examples, and I loved that last reflection. You know, like be flexible, don't panic, be calm, and always have an emergency plan. And again, we go back to how we started our webinar today: is preparation is key. So always be prepared for those things to happen. And I don't know if someone else has a question and they want to raise your hand, or if you have a comment you would like to share before we close our session here today. Remember to use the raise hand button on the Zoom reactions, or if you're on YouTube, type the question in the chat and Sally here will bring it to us. Good. Everyone understood everything, or they didn't understand anything. One of those two. I don't know. I bet that you guys did it. And of course, if you have any further questions, once you go home after this webinar and you want to ask us about it, you have our the Virtual Events Toolkit email there. You can always write to us and we will be happy to help you. So thank you everyone for joining us today.
Well, thanks so much, Elena. You've had a vast experience, and we really appreciate you sharing some of your tips and strategies to make us all successful. And I know you read the questions that are sent, and I know you answer the questions that are sent to the email address. So that's great. I just wanted to tell everyone about the next practice. And the next practice, or excuse me, the next session is how to host a technical panel practice. And in that session, we'll go over how to set up a technical panel practice, some tips for virtual tech panel calling, which are a little different than when you're calling at a live event, as well as how to enter the elements on the spreadsheet that's been created. So I hope to see you all there next week. Thanks so much for attending this session. I hope you learned something, and I hope to see you next week. So thanks, and we'll see you.
Bye.